I'd like to take you on a journey back in time to 1995. 30 years ago, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like 30 years ago to me in 1995. I was a 20-odd-year-old young man selling Rovers back then. Anyway, the UK's car market was a very different space than it is now. And the top 5 best-selling cars that year were as follows in order. At number 1 it was the Ford Escort, at number 2 it was the Ford Fiesta, at number 3 was the Mondeo from Ford, number 4 was the Vauxhall Astra, and number 5 was the Vauxhall Cavalier. Ford had locked out the top 3 spaces. Now I think that's quite an interesting thing, because that was a sort of a snapshot, if you like, of the loyalty that people had towards the Ford brand. They were buying them in their droves. And that was despite the fact that the Escort, the Mark V Escort that was around back in 1995, wasn't actually that good a car. When it was launched in 1990, the press annihilated it, thanks to stodgy handling, rough engines, dodgy gear shifts. So much bad was it that Ford rushed in a facelift just 2 short years later. But it didn't matter. Ford was selling them hand over fist because people loved them. But fast forward to now, in 2025, and it's a very different picture. If we look at the top 10 best-selling cars in the UK, there's only one Ford, and that's the little Puma, and that's languishing down in 7th place. There's no more Focus, there's no more Fiesta, there's no more Mondeo. What's happening to Ford? Now, Ford needs a car that's going to fill up suburban Sundays with people outside washing their blue ovals. Ford needs to get back on track as a company in the UK and start to be the force that it once was. And what better way to do it than to do it perhaps with one of these, a medium-sized all-electric SUV crossover style of car, which is exactly what it has here in the Explorer. However, it's not quite as easy as that. And the reason being is that market space is crowded with talent, and I mean good talent. And one of the best that it has to go up against is this, the Scenic from Renault. So, who does it best, Ford or Renault? Time to find out in this week's twin test as I say, welcome to the Ford Explorer, welcome to the Renault Scenic, and as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before I get started on this week's twin test between Ford's Explorer and Renault Scenic, it is of course the time where I would just ask you to make sure that you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Then once you've done that, make sure you then press the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way you'll be notified when our next video is uploaded and it's gone live. Once you've watched the reviews, if you enjoy it, and obviously I hope you do, then make sure you give it a little thumbs up, and don't forget, leave us your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about the cars review, such as the Ford Explorer and the Renault Scenic, and of course on the AutoEV channel as a whole. Now, you're probably all sitting there thinking the Explorer's not exactly a new car, Brian. You know, it's been out for a little while now. Now, here's an interesting wee story for you. About 2 and a bit years ago, Ford invited me down to their Dunton facility. We were down there to sort of see how they come up with different ideas and how they design various bits of the Transit and things like that. But they took the covers off a car that they said, we're going to build this. And it was this. In fact, back then it was actually called the Explorer Sport. And if you know anything really about the electric vehicle world, and most of you do, then you'll probably know it's also built on Volkswagen's MEB platform. Now, there was an interesting scenario here because they delayed the car coming out because Volkswagen were updating sort of like battery tech and things like that. So Ford obviously wanted the very latest stuff. So the car didn't appear for quite some time after that. And just with one thing and another, we've not really managed to get our hands on a car, but obviously now we have. Now, of course, you're going to be thinking, well, why is Ford getting in bed with Volkswagen? But in some respects, they always have in some ways. What did Volkswagen get out of the deal? Well, they get the Transit, believe it or not, because the new Volkswagen Transporter underneath is effectively a Transit platform. And of course, what Ford get is the electric architecture of Volkswagen's MEB platform. And we know how good that can be, because obviously we've seen it in cars such as the ID4, the ID5 from Volkswagen, Skoda Enyaq, Audi Q4 e-tron, Cupra, yada 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 yada. But it's taken their sweet time to get a car to us. And of course, in that time, we've had this, the Renault Scenic. And again, if you're a regular viewer of AutoEV, you will know how much we love the Scenic. I think it's one of the best cars in this market sector. I think it's an absolute outstanding family car. And that's the thing. we're viewing them as family cars, okay? They have to fit within the family lifestyle. And of course, that is where Ford's key sort of like market used to be, you know, just good, basic, run-of-the-mill family cars. So, interesting scenario. Who does it best, as I say, Ford or Renault? Well, it's not going to have an easy fight, the Explorer, because as I say, we really like the Scenic. In fact, it walked away with the best medium-sized SUV, electric SUV award in our 2024 awards. But believe it or not, I hadn't driven an Explorer up until this week. And now I've had time to get my thoughts together, I thought, let's get them both head to head and find out which one's best. Right, let's start with how the cars look, okay? Now, again, if you watched the Capri review, you'll know I was a bit nonplussed about that car. The Explorer, I like. I have to admit that. Even my brother-in-law the other day, I popped up to his house the other day to drop a few things off, and he looked outside and went, quite like that, that's quite nice. And he drives an X5 and a 911, so even he's standing there going, yeah, that's a good looking wee car, that. I quite like that. And actually, I have to say, I do. I think it's quite a good look. It's a bit blandish round the front, in fairness. It's not exactly striking. However, it's neat, it's inoffensive, and it just works. It's in proportion, and I think there's a bit of this sort of like the proper big Explorer in there, isn't there? Now, that's why they were going to call it originally the Explorer Sport. You know, like Discovery and Discovery Sport. It's a smart, shrunken version of the big Explorer. And I think that's a decent looking big SUV. So I do like what they've done with it. Of course, you get your big oval, blue oval slap bang in the middle there, which I do like. Big, loud and prominent. And then Explorer and the 3D lettering just across the strip between the headlights there. So I think that's a nice wee touch. You get the sort of tick daytime running lights there. And of course, you get your main LED lights in there. All the cooling's done down at the bottom, as you'd expect. There's no grille on the car, obviously not needed. And of course, there's a radar, there's a sensor in there for the radar guided cruise control. There's also a nice little front-facing camera there, and all the Explorer lettering, and some contrasting bits of plastic down at the bottom there. So yes, I think it's sort of like setting its style out a little bit better than the Capri has. And as I say, in terms of the way that it looks, I think we're off to a good start with it, because as I say, I think it's a good looking little car. Now, as we go around the side, again, it's that neat, well-proportioned piece of design that I like. You know, there's nothing fancy on it. It's not trying to be sort of like ape cars of old or anything like that. I think it's just a well-proportioned, nice piece of design for a medium-sized SUV. I think they've done well with it. I like the wheel arch treatment here, where you've got the sort of the circular wheel arches there, with the plastic sort of like extensions around it, but then also that curve is mirrored in the actual panel work above it. I think that's neat. I really like this paint colour as well. I think this is a lovely colour for it. It's called Magnetic. It's an option, obviously, because it's metallic paint, but I think this is a really nice colour for it. Talking of options, obviously we'll go through trims and stuff later on, but also, this one's also sitting on the optional 21-inch wheels, okay? So obviously depending on trim level, depending on wheel sizes you get, but these are the optional 21s. Are they needed? Personally not so sure. There we go. Proper big door handles, you know, big chunky door handles. None of this hidden stuff at the back either, so it's got a proper big door handle at the back. You've got this rear quarter-light window here, but it's got this graphic in it which makes this look like the pillar, but it's not. That's just the graphic over the actual window. So again, that's nice. And of course into this big roof spoiler at the back. But yeah, as I say, nice, well proportioned and neat. Nothing too fancy, but certainly nothing offensive at all. Now, as we come around the back, the first thing I say is, look, there's hardly any overhang there. The wheels are right out to the edges of the car, and that gives it, as I say, that nice sort of stance. That's nice. The back end of the car, like the front, I do like. Again, it's just neat, isn't it? You know, it looks like the big Explorer SUV. You get the lights that sort of drop down to the side, the black strip that runs in between the two with the 3D Explorer lettering. Again, like the front, the big blue oval badge there. Obviously, as I say, big roof spoiler at the top, high level brake light, rear wiper. There's a camera mounted just underneath the tailgate there with a washer nozzle as well. And at the bottom you get the black plastic cladding, parking sensors, and again just that little bit of contrasting grey there to make it stand out a little bit. But like I say, I really like the way it looks. I think it's a much nicer looking car than the Capri. I think it's not trying to be something that it's not. It's just neat. However, it does have to compete with the Scenic, which I think is a great looking car. I really like the way the Scenic looks. Now, we first drove the Scenic last year at its launch, and immediately, you know, I really liked the way that the car looked. As I say, it brought me in mind of the Megane E-Tech, which I was running as a long-term test car at the time. And as I say, but it's not just sort of like an SUV'd Megane, if that makes sense. It's not a Megane estate or a crossover style of Megane. It is its own distinct style. And we've seen a lot of this new Renault design in a lot of the new products, like the Rafale, their big D-segment SUV coupe style of car, with these sort of like the Renault diamond, if you like, which is sort of then imprinted, embossed, if you like, in this section at the top of the bumper or grille area, if you like. And that's nice. I like it. It's neat. You know, I like the way that it all sort of, you know, it gives the car sort of like a face almost. Very slim headlights, you know, over here, and I love these sort of boomerang style DRLs and indicator turns there. Again, it's a real Renault feature, that. But as I say, it's not, it has its own design, if language, if that makes sense. It has its own style, the Scenic. Of course, you get the big Renault badge in the centre there. Parking sensors down at the bottom. You got a camera again neatly embedded into the front there, and this nice sort of almost clamshell style bonnet which just bleeds over its edges just into sort of the tops of the wings. So yeah, as I say, I like this, I like the Explorer, but I really like the Scenic. But what I will say is this, manufacturers, can you stop doing this with these keys that, you know, lock and unlock as you approach and walk away again? Because it's really irritating when I'm filming. I've tried my best to switch it off and I can't find out how you do it. And it's really irritating when both cars sit in the driveway and I've got the keys in my pocket and I go to take the bins out, indicators start flashing and cars start locking and all as I walk past them. Just stop it. What was wrong with just hitting a flipper, eh? Just see, that's done it again. Stop it, please. Now down the side, the Megane has a little bit more, dare I suggest, character about it and some of its sort of like features. You'll notice down the bottom here, you've got this textured sort of plastic, if you like, that's on the side sills. Again, not dissimilar to what they've done on the Megane. This one does have the flush door handles, as I say, as soon as you walk up to it with the key in your pocket, well, it's not really even a key, is it? It's a card, which is a bit daft. The handles pop out, so you know they're quite easy to get. But if they're flush, you've got to push one bit in, then pull the handle out, which isn't ideal. Maybe if you have your hands full. Okay, but you get your contrast roof rails, which the Explorer doesn't get. It doesn't get roof rails on the Explorer, so this is a bit easier if you want to have crossbars. You know, put roof boxes or bike racks on it and things like that. 20-inch wheels on the Megane, which are nice. They've got these aero covers on them as well. Bit more interesting than the Fords in some respects. I do like them. Only thing I don't particularly like about the Renault is where the charging flap is, because it's on the front wing. I never think that's the best place for it, because the way you park you might have to drag the cable across the bonnet. But that's just me, maybe, perhaps. Of course, you get privacy glass, and again you get this sort of flash of sort of like silver, aluminium silver here, which obviously follows from the top of the window line down into here. So as I say, there's a bit more visual interest in the Scenic than there is in the Ford as well. And some of the lines are a bit sharper as well. Whilst it's neat on the Ford, you get quite a nice sort of like sharpness to the Renault Scenic's design, which I do quite like. This is the metallic black, which you can see is just showing all the crap and dot on it as well. So, but obviously other colours are available on it. Now, again, round the back, a couple of nice little bits here. You've got this, I don't really know what to call it. I mean, obviously it's covered in bird crap at the moment because I've been using these cars, apologies. But it's this sort of like slightly extended part here, which helps also a bit of airflow there, and it just juts out to the back bumper. You get the nice, neat smoked rear lights, a bit like the Explorer, obviously, they're smoked as well. You know, just there in the sort of Y configuration there. The big Renault badge there, the Scenic in the centre, and of course underneath here you've got your boot release, you've got your camera. No washer nozzle on this one though, it does on the Ford, not on the Renault. High level brake light there, rear wiper, and again more of that plastic at the bottom there just for practicality when it comes to the rear bumper and rear parking. Right, enough's enough, I've talked enough about it. Personally, and I do mean this, personally, I think the Scenic's the better looking car, but I don't not like the Ford. I think the Explorer is quite a neat looking car, and as I say, there's a lot of people have commented how quite smart it looks, in fairness, the time I've had the car. So for me personally, I think the Renault just edges it in the design stakes, but I wouldn't disagree with anyone if they said they preferred the Explorer in some respects, because more of it's sort of like, dare I suggest, more sort of like less fussy design, more neat proportions and that type of thing. But it doesn't really matter what I think, does it? It matters what you think, because you guys are out there buying these cars. Which one do you prefer, just on looks alone? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Right, boot space. Now, there's a bit to explain about this particular car I have, which I will a little bit later on, okay? But this basically is the, and we'll talk about specs and prices and options obviously as we get into the pricing section. But this is a premium model, which means it also gets the sort of kick style tailgate thing, which I normally can never get to work, although I have managed it a couple of times on this. There we go. The Renault has a power tailgate as well, but you've got to do it just off the handle of the key. Okay, right, 527 litres of boot space is what you get in the Explorer. Now Ford also say that that is with the boot floor removed, but in fairness to Ford, there's not a huge amount of depth gained by doing that, you know, so it's still quite a decent boot the way it normally is configured. And if you take, I mean, that's just handy for storing the cable bag, you know, things like your first aid kit, your warning triangles and stuff like that in there anyway. There's no space up at the front in either car anyway. So that, and it also means if you do keep the boot floor in place, then obviously you've got a nice level floor to load into, obviously, rather than having a little drop in. The seats will split in a 60-40 fashion. And with a ski hatch going through the middle, and if you fold all the seats down, it takes total capacity up to 1,455 litres in the Explorer. Only downside is you do have one of these just soft sort of like covers in some respects, which will clip out, but in fairness it does mean obviously if you put something too high it's going to still close because that's got some give in it. Okay, now suitcases, yes, you can get all four of the suitcases in, but oddly enough there isn't enough depth of boot to go that way, so what you have to do is actually put that big one down on its back like that and one of the carry-ons on top of it. Okay, so that's how that works there, and then you put the medium one, that will then go that way because obviously the way the floor is shaped like that, and then obviously you can get the other carry-on neatly down the side there, and there's still enough room there you could probably throw a handbag or a camera bag or a rucksack in there as well. So in fairness, it's actually quite a decent practical boot. We saw that the Capri had a decent size of boot as well, and the Explorer is no different in that sense. However, the Renault is bigger, not by much, but it is bigger at 545 litres of boot space, which if you fold the rear seats down, which fold in a more practical 40-20-40 split, it will take total capacity up to 1,670 litres. So there's much more space in the Renault. You get the hard parcel shelf there. There's a little bit more of a drop into the boot, but not much. And there is more of a dedicated trough for cables in the back of the Renault as well. So it doesn't really have the variable height floor of the Ford, where you can get that little bit extra depth. But in terms of the cable storage, it is bigger in there. Now, if we do the suitcases, it's the same again. There isn't quite the depth between there to get the big suitcase in like that, which means you've got to turn it onto its back and drop it in there with one of the carry-ons at the side there. However, then our medium one will go in, he says. It did. There we go, it goes in there. And then your other carry-on down the side, and again with just enough space for a couple of rucksacks or a softer bag there. So they're fairly even Stevens, but in terms of the actual boot space itself, it is the Renault that takes overall victory, being slightly bigger, especially with the seats down, and especially, as I say, because of that split on that rear seat with the 40-20-40, which means you can still carry two rear passengers, fold down the centre section and get a long load through if you do need to. So the Renault wins this part. Right, the Explorer in the back. Ooh. Well, it's fine back here in fairness. There's a good amount of room, as you'd expect. It's on Volkswagen's MEB platform, and there's never been a problem when it comes to sort of like accommodation on the MEB platform. There's an open floor, so you've got a walk through, so you can get a third person, and because of the way that the rear bench is designed, you can actually get a third person sort of like sitting in the middle without too much discomfort. It's a relatively flat bench across. Some okay sculpting at the side to support the outer two, in fairness. The only thing is, I can get my feet just underneath there, but it is a little bit tight. But that is my driving position, which if you're a regular viewer, you'll know I like my seat all the way down. So that is maybe, sort of like part and parcel of that sort of like driving position. There's mat pockets there. As you'd expect, there is a armrest with cup holders in. There is a load through, in fairness. So whilst the seat doesn't split, and it is a smaller aperture than you get in the Renault, and I'll explain why when we get into the Renault, you do still have the ability to put a load through. I maybe should have made that point when we were in the boot. So in fairness, although it's a smaller aperture, you can still do it. There's door bins. They've got water bottle shaped holders at the front of them, and the ISOFIX points are nice and easy to get to because they're just behind these plastic covers, so well done Ford on that. As I say, there's two USB-C ports there, there's face vents down there. Now, the panoramic glass sunroof, it's fitted here, doesn't have a blind on it. And I was looking into this, but the reason being is, and you'll understand why, with the Renault it has this very clever trick, this solar bay roof, as Renault call it, where it can go opaque and clear at a touch of a button. And I thought, wonder what Ford have to say about this. And they say in terms of the way the sort of like the thermal management of the glass works, it keeps the cabin cool. You know, so it doesn't, you know, sort of have a huge amount of sun coming down and sort of warming up the cabin as such. So it retains the heat inside the car, or the coolness inside the car, without sort of like enhancing the heat by letting the sunshine in. But there's no getting away from the fact that it is just a big piece of glass. So depending obviously what you like. Now that's fine for me in the UK. I like the fact that it's nice and open. I like the fact that it's very airy, because this is a dark car inside. You know, it's a dark coloured interior you get with the Explorer. But I understand, you know, obviously some of our viewers maybe in sort of like hotter climes are saying, well, actually we'd quite like a blind, or not even to have the roof at all. So just, you know, just be aware that Ford do say it is quite cleverly managed in terms of the way the glass works, but there is no blind in it at all. But in terms of rear accommodation, it's absolutely fine. You know, I've got good leg room, you know, there's enough knee room for me, there's enough headroom for me, again, even with this roof, this glass roof, and I'm only 5'8", but I'd still got a reasonably tall hat on if I was in the back here, and you know, in terms of the actual space, as I say, if there was 3 across, there'd be no problem at all, and there's enough storage for most people's needs. But I have a sneaky suspicion that the Renault is slightly better, as we will now find out. And the reason I think the Renault is slightly better is I think it works better as a family car, which obviously these cars are designed to be, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Okay, so first of all, in terms of accommodation, you have got, again, a flat floor across. There is good knee room, but not a lot of foot room for me, in fairness. In fact, actually, I can't get my feet below that driver's seat. Okay, so I will give that to the Ford. You can get your feet just underneath the seat in the back of the Ford. However, when you're back here, there's slightly more in terms of, there's an airiness to the car, because obviously this one has a light interior as well, and you've got this roof. So this is Renault's what they call solar bay roof, and it has a switch. It's a Porsche and Audi now do the same on the Taycan and the e-tron GT, where you can have it sort of like done in sections where it will go clear or opaque. So if you want the back half sort of like opaque, the front half clear like a sunroof, you can. Vice versa, if you want sections of it open and sections of it sort of like opaque, you can have that. It's very clever, you know. As I say, we've seen it on more Renault models now, so the Rafale has it now as well, and it's really good. And it just keeps the cabin really cool. I mean, obviously, although it's March, it's, you know, and it was frosty this morning, the day's getting warmer. This cabin feels a lot cooler from that sunshine than the Explorer's does. So there you go. You'd sit a little bit lower in the Renault as well. The Scenic has more of a sort of an SUV-esque sort of style to it, so you do sit slightly higher up in it. However, when you're back here, all things become wonderful. You've got more pockets, so you've got 2 small pockets on the upper section of the seat there, you know, on either side, you know, for like slotting a mobile phone in, or maybe a packet of Polar Mints. Then you've got sort of like the big pocket there, you know, where you can fit in, you know, sort of like say a tablet or a Kindle or something like that, that can slide in there. There's 2 USB-C ports down there like you get in the Ford as well, and 2 face vents too. The door bins, they're roughly the same size. Again, they're shaped for a water bottle, but the difference is they're lined. They're lined with carpet in the Renault, which is a big thing. But I haven't got to the best bit of it all, which is here. And it's this. It's what Renault call the magic armrest. And it is magic, I think, because first of all, you've got these 2 cup holders in the front there. What's good about that, Brian? You've got cup holders in the Ford. Haven't finished yet, because then you open it up, you've got storage in there. But then what you can also do is rotate these round. Look at this. Cup holder in there. And then what you can then do is slot your iPad in, or your phone, or however you want it. You know, you can have one either side like that. Oop, he says. so the kids can watch, you know, individual iPads. There's storage in there. There's more USB charging ports in there. There's another 2 USB-C charging ports in there. I mean, it's a simple thing, but you know what? I think it's just a really, really clever thing as a family car. Now, this really works because at Christmas time, as a family, we went to Scotland in a Renault Rafale, which has this. My daughter loved this. She got her water bottle here, she got her iPad up there, she could pop her phone in that one and charge it, or she could read her Kindle just without holding it, stuff like that. It's brilliant. And then, of course, as I say, if you just fold that down, you've got a nice comfortable armrest on which to watch. It just works, and that's what I mean as a family car. You know, when you've got kids in the back, something really simple. Somebody's really thought about that. And that's what I like. It's a really simple idea, just with grooves cut with little rubber grips in them to hold devices, and they rotate round so you can have them at different angles, and they say they're big enough to take a big Yeti coffee flask. That I like, and that's why I think the Scenic works slightly better than the Explorer in terms of its rear space. Although there's less footroom, I think it works better as a family car than the Explorer does, just for something simple as that, and the cleverness of that roof, and the fact that it just feels a bit lighter in here. So again, it's the Scenic that takes the win, I think, in the rear accommodation. Now, if you've watched the Capri review, you'll understand what I'm about to say in terms of the interior of the Explorer, okay? It's a good place and a bad place in some respects, okay? So I'm going to start with most of the good stuff. Now, I don't want to be down too hard on the Ford because, as I say, in some respects, the Explorer to me makes an awful lot more sense than the Capri does. I just find that car just, I don't know, nonsensical in some respects. But the Explorer, I get, it's a family SUV. And there is a lot to like in here. I like the design of it, okay? That's the first thing I said I liked. I do like this sort of design that it's got. And again, it's got this sort of two-tone finish to it. Why have they not done that in the seats? It would be nice if they maybe did the seat centres just to give it a little bit of a lift, or the headlining. Anyway, there you go, it doesn't. And then you get this B&O sort of like, you know, speaker across the top of like a sound bar. It's like almost like the top of the binnacle of an instrument binnacle, but it's not, but it's a, you know, it's like the B&O sound bar, which is quite cool. The main event is this screen here. Okay, and like the Capri, you can move it. So you can, see, I put my little action camera in there while I went and got the Renault, and you can just lock, and it'll lock, you know, so once somebody comes in, they can't get into it, because when you lock the car, it locks itself in place. So you can adjust the actual angle that the screen is at in that sense. So you can put it through various different steps to get the angle you like. I like that. I think that's clever. You know, I do like it. So you can have it upright like the Mustang Mach-E, or say like the Polestar 2, that style of car, or you can have it really sharply angled, which I quite like that. The downside is you've got to control everything through the screen, okay? Now, this is good and bad. Let me show you why. I'm not going to spend too long doing this because I know I waffle on. You get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, okay? And it's wireless, which is good. And I do quite like, I mentioned the Polestar 2 there, which again, one of the things I like about the Ford is the icons are nice, big and bold. Look at them, you know, you're just that grid pattern there. So it's really easy to use as you're driving along. You want your navigation, there you go, you know, but it's not, there you go. Sorry, it was on the destination thing there, okay? So the map comes up like that. All the icons are really big and clear. You want to go into your driving assistance, it's there. And you can have it so that it is a list, like this, or you can change it so that's a 3D image like this, where you can go through the various different bits that you want there, yeah? Okay, so I do quite like that. That's the one thing I will quite like. And also as well, your climate control is permanently on down at the bottom there. So your heated seats, your temperature control, your direction control, that's on. And if you want a bigger screen for that, you press the direction control and it comes up with a much bigger screen. The only downside is you've got to go into that screen to adjust fan speed. So if you don't have it on auto, you've got to adjust fan speed. So it's a two-stage process to adjust the fan speed, okay? So that's all good, that's fine. My issue here becomes this. There's too much stuff to go through. There's too many menus to go through, okay? So again, if we go back to the home page, and you want to imagine that we're driving along, we want to switch off, say, the driver assistance stuff, okay? It's at the top here, so you go into the car setting. There it is there. Oh, hang on, where is it? No, it's not, sorry, my apologies, it's not. You go into your menu, driver assistance, There it is there. Turn off lane keep assist, okay, which is that icon there. There we go, that's that now off. Go back, turn off your speed limit warning, turn that off, go back. It's too many steps. It's just too laborious. And the downside is, if you get out the car, because this is the Volkswagen architecture, when you sit in the car and put your foot in the brake, the car starts, okay? So you switch all that off, and then you think, oh, I'll take my jacket off. You get out of the car, it all defaults on, because as soon as you go out of the car switches itself off again. So it defaults all that on. Now, I am told there is somewhere you can stop that from happening, but I haven't found it personally, okay? That is a pain in the proverbial, okay? And it's just too laborious to go through. That's the downside with it, okay? I don't mind the layout. I think it's quite clear. You've got to get used to the fact that everything is done through the screen. There is no physical buttons in the car, you know, in terms of turning stuff on and off and things like that. So you've got to use the screen. It's not bad because I say it's big, bold and clear, but it is just too in depth. There's too many steps to do certain things. I just find it, yeah, no. Okay, so that's good. I don't mind that, okay? So that's fairly clear and that's all right. But then Ford have done the ridiculous thing, as I said on the Capri review, they fitted the Volkswagen touch sensitive buttons. And I'm sorry, they're just awful to use. You know, volume, it doesn't work. You know, you've got a volume slider there, which is, you've got to really push down on it, because if you just swipe it, it doesn't work. You've got to push it and then slide it. Why do you have to do that? You know, and again, it's the same with the volume on this. You've got to, it's a haptic button, but it's not a haptic button. It's weird, you know. And the heated steering wheel button on this side, I've hit it 3 times while driving round roundabouts and stuff, and it switches the heated steering wheel on. I don't want it on. Come on, Ford. You used to do stuff that was just really sensible. Big, chunky switchgear, and why have you not done your own switchgear for the car? You've got the silly light panel down here by the right knee for switching the lights on that you get with the Volkswagen. The driver's binnacle, again, in front of it is the Volkswagen one. So again, you know, you've got this little binnacle here with the, you know, with the speed, the gear shift indication. You can change the view of it, but not much. You can't do much with it. There is a head-up display, I will give you that, but that's an option. It's part of the driver assistance package, and I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. So I'm really disappointed with that. That's the bit that really disappoints me. And then you've got this column stock where everything's on it. So the lights, wipers, indicators, rear wiper, they're all there on this one stock, because this one over here is the Volkswagen transmission lever. So you twist it to drive, twist it back for reverse, push it for park. And then the crime of all crimes is these bloody window switches where you've only got 2. You've then got to press one button to activate the rear ones, then again to use the button. Why? No one likes them. Why have you done it? And there's a huge amount of this piano black here, which is all dusty and scratched on this one as well. The other thing I've got a beef with, again, if you watch the Capri reviews, I've got an iPhone 15 Pro Max, okay? Not showing off, I'm just telling you that's the phone I have. And it's got just a case on it, just a clear plastic case, which has a slight guard around it, obviously, if I drop the phone. I can't show you because I'm using it for filming. This wireless charger in here doesn't pick it up. You put it down there and it comes up and says it can't wireless charge because it's got a case on it. Works in the Renault, works on my Genesis, works in every other press car I've got. In the Fords, doesn't work because it comes up and says because you've got a case on it. Who doesn't have a case on their phone? Silly little annoyances, which just to me shouldn't be in a car at this level. The seats. The seats are all right, but I will say this, they're quite hard and there's no real support on them, okay? So I quite like the design of them. I quite like the sort of like, you know, sort of like this diamond stitch in the middle of it and stuff like that. That's quite nice. But in fairness, you sit quite high in the car, which is nice. There isn't really a lot of sponginess in them. There's no real give in them. So they're very hard and means you don't sink into them. And actually then, as we'll discover when you're driving, you tend to roll out of them as well. So that's not so good. The driving position itself is all right. You know, you've got adjustment on the steering wheel for reach and for rake. You know, this slightly squared off wheel, that's okay. I don't mind that so much. That's quite nice. And the actual, you know, sort of like the driving position itself is quite good. But the seats could be better. So there we go. Storage, well, you get 2 cup holders here. You've got armrest where you can take this out. They call, I can't remember what they call it. There's something, the Max box or something like that. You can actually take the centre bit out there, so you can actually slot a laptop down in there, they say. But then you'd be able to see it through the front section, so I don't quite understand. It's not from a security point of view, that, surely. So I don't know why you would lose the ability to have a cup holder. But anyway, there you go, that's what you can do. See, oh, and then see, you've got your little bit underneath here as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And of course, as I say, in here, that's quite nice, I like that. So look, it's an okay interior, all right? I just think it could be better. The quality of it's okay, it's not bad. Everything seems fairly well built. There's a bit of sponginess and spring back on this leatherette style of material on the dashboard here. There's this carbon fibre material style thing down here and across the strip of the dash. That's all right. I like the B&O sound system, but it's just all, and I don't mind this screen in some respects, but it's just, there's just too much stuff in it. You just got to go through too many steps to do basic stuff. That's the annoying thing. And then the switchgear that's all from Volkswagen, which I don't like in Volkswagen, so I'm certainly not going to like it when it's in a Ford. So yeah, so it's all right, but it could be a lot better. Right, the Renault. Let me switch the car on a bit. There we go. Right, now in fairness, I've got quite a lot of experience with this interior because it's very similar to what I had in my Megane. The Megane, when it first came out, had the slightly smaller screen. However, the Scenic always got this bigger screen, and now Meganes get the same size, so that's a lot better. So at first acquaintance you go, oh, it doesn't look quite as fancy, doesn't look quite as luxurious, and maybe in some respects it's not. Hang on a second, I'll turn the fan speed down a wee minute. Maybe in some respects it's not at first acquaintance, because when you start using it you realise actually this is a really good interior. There's a lot to like in here. Okay, so you get the two screens, this sort of L shape here if you like. Driver's display in front of you, much more configurable than it is in the Ford, okay? It's very stylised though, that's what you have to get used to. You know, it's not just a clear numbers and stuff like that, but it's much more kind of design led, you know, in terms of, you know, on a diagonal things and colours and stuff like that. But in fairness, it's very clear, it's very big, it's very easy to read. That's the one thing I will say. And as I say, you can configure a lot more of it. You can do a lot more. So you can have things like the power meter in there, you can have a trip meter in there, you can put the map in there, which you can't do on the Ford. So you can throw the map into there. So you've got your navigation dead in front of you. No head-up display though, okay? So whilst it's an option on the Ford, you don't get it in the Renault at all, so there's no head-up display. But that's all the bits and pieces, you know, so it's much more configurable in terms of the dashboard. So that's the first thing I like about it. Then you move on to this here, the screen itself. Okay, not as big as you get in the Ford, okay, but it runs a Google operating system, which I think is the absolute best that you can get. I love the Google operating system in cars, I really do. I think they work really well. Polestar use it, Renault use it, I'm sure other manufacturers do as well, and it's just nice and simple to use. And obviously you can use Google Maps for your navigation, you know, which again, you know, I think is better. The navigation system is better than you get in the Ford because it is Google. So from that point of view, it's nicer. And then obviously it splits the screen, so you can still have your audio down there and your Google Assistant there as well. So you've got voice activation as well using the Google Assistant. So hey, you know, navigate me to wherever and things like that. Okay, so that is a lot better in my opinion. Then the sort of like, you know, things like the icons. Again, like the Ford, because they're nice, they're clear, they're open up, you know, there's a lot of space between them, they're laid out in a grid fashion, they're nice and easy to use on the move, and there is a slight angle of that screen, you know, as you're sitting there, so it is slightly angled more towards the driver, which is quite nice as well. When you go into, say, the car settings to set certain things up, again, it's nice, the colours are different, you know, again, it's just a little bit, I don't know, it's just a little bit, it feels a bit more modern than the Ford's does. The Ford feels a bit basic, although I can't take it away too much from the Ford because I quite like the basic layout of it. Do you know what I mean? I like the fact that it's not too complicated, but neither is this. It just looks visually a little bit more modern, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's the first thing. You also get physical controls at the bottom for stuff like your climate control. Thank you, Renault. So temperature adjustment, you know, it's on these rocker switches there. Airflow adjustment, it's there, so it's not done through the screen. Aircon, air distribution, automatic climate, heated rear screen, maximum defrost, fan speed and temperature for passenger side. So that is on physical buttons, okay? The only thing you need to use the touchscreen for in terms of the climate control is syncing up the temperature and switching on your heated seats or your heated steering wheel. That's it, okay? The rest of it's done through these physical buttons. The display's on the screen, but the actual buttons, the functionality's on the buttons, which I like. This wireless charging pad does charge my mobile. And it's got the little grips, you know, it's rubber lined, it's got the little grips to stop it sliding around. Quite like that little shelf. And you've got a nice load of storage here, so you've got storage way down there, you've got a variable cup holder there, you've got another fixed one there, which will take my Yeti coffee flask. You've got a very deep centre armrest there. Doesn't move, doesn't do anything particularly fancy, and then there's just a little slot at the front that you can drop the key into, or your wallet or your house keys or whatever. So again, the storage, like in the Ford, is very good. You know, there's enough space for all your bits and pieces, you know, especially again as a family, you're travelling around, you know, your packet of Frutellas down in there or whatever, you know, they can throw some sweets in the back for the kids or whatever. There's loads of space there. Like the back, the door bins are lined with carpets so things don't rattle around. Brilliant. But the big thing for me is this whole switching systems off, because Renault have the My Perso button, which is just the best thing in the automotive world, I think, at the moment. So in other words, I'm sitting on something. What am I sitting on? I'm sitting on my iPad cover. Yes, oh, see that? Look at that Ford. 4 electric windows. I just put the rear window down. What you've got here is you can set it, so if you don't want the speed limit warning or lane keep assist on, which is the two that I immediately switch off when I'm in a car. Okay, I leave the rest on, you know, the distance guided stuff and all the rest of it. But you can set it up, so there's a button down here called My Perso, and what you do is you press it once to turn it off, and it will then ask you again to confirm it. Press again for My Safety Perso. That's it. That's all now switched off. 2 presses of a button, off. Don't have to go into the screen. Once you've set it all up, that's all it is. It's as simple as that. It's a physical button by your right knee. What a simple, clever solution that is. Right, so that's excellent. Similar to the Ford, you've got the slightly squared off steering wheel, enough buttons on it, so again, but they're physical buttons. So again, you've got to physically push the button to make it work, okay? Then you've got cruise control on that side and your media, not your media, your Bluetooth and your configuration for your dashboard there. Your media control, I don't know if I can turn it there, I don't know if you can see it there, is the Renault third stock, if you like, this media control stock, where you've got the dial on the back for tuning, volume at the end, and the source and mode buttons on either side there. Now, I get on okay with that. A lot of people don't like it. I don't mind it. What I will say, however, is because you've got your gear, your transmission lever on the top, then you've got your wiper, then you've got the media control. Some people find that a bit fussy. Now, that was like that in my Megane E-Tech, and I ran that car for 3 months, just under 3,000 miles. I did get used to it, okay? But I do understand some people don't like it. There's a lot going on over the right-hand side of the wheel, so it's up to you how you find it. And then, of course, you've just got your lights, indicators and lights over on the left-hand side there. Your driving modes, which we'll talk about now, you've got multi-sense. So in the Ford, it's done through the screen. On the Renault, it's done on a button. So you press this, and it comes up with your multi-sense, and you can see them on the dashboard. Eco, Sport, what's coming up there? Perso, Comfort. Okay, so you can choose how you feel, but it's done through the button on the steering wheel. The seats, way better than you get in the Ford. And as I say, I don't mind the design of the Ford, but the comfort of the Renault seats are way better. There's much more support down the side. They're much longer in the squab. There's much more cushioning, so you feel that you do sink into the seat a little bit better. You don't have quite the same elevated driving position that you get in the Ford, in fairness, although you can obviously adjust it. You know, so you get electric driver's seat. This is an iconic trim. I'll talk about the Ford a bit later on because there's a lot to say about that. And it's the same, electric driver's seat, but manual passenger seat. You've also got massage function on both cars as well for the driver, okay? The dash itself I really like, so you get this sort of tweed layout, it's tweed material on the top. There's this veneer that runs across the top, which according to Renault is actually real wood, which is then laser etched with this pattern in it. Now, I'm not so sure about that, but that's what they tell me it is, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's nice. It's got a nice look to it. And in this model, you get, like Ford with the B&O, you get the Harman Kardon sound system in the Renault. Light grey headlining, or lighter grey headlining in the Renault, which again, along with the roof, makes it feel a bit more open. And the other thing with the Renault is you get the camera at the back. So you can now use either the mirror as a mirror, But if you've got 3 big rugby players in the back, you can flip it to a camera, and that gives you the view from the camera rather than the mirror. So you've got an uninterrupted view of what's behind you. You don't get that in the Ford at all. It's not even an option. So that's quite clever. So you can have the choice between. And the driving position, as I say, having had the Megane for as long, I like the driving position of this car, but so you do sit a bit lower in it. So for me, the interior is much more logically laid out. The operating system is better. There's more physical buttons to use. It's a more comfortable interior because of the seats. And the big thing for me is the safety systems that you can switch off with just the one button. No, it doesn't maybe look immediately quite as plush, or dare I suggest even as luxurious as the Ford in first acquaintance, but its usability is much, much better. So if that's what's important to you, and it is to me, especially when you're driving, all of this and the fact that it's Google operating system means that for me, the Renault takes another win in this category. Right, let's talk about the batteries. Now you can have both cars with different sizes of batteries depending obviously on your needs and, dare I suggest, your budget, okay? So the Ford starts with the 52 kilowatt hour standard range car. That's a rear wheel drive, single motor rear wheel drive, and that gives a WLTP range of up to 221 miles, okay? Charging speed on that car is 145 kilowatts, 10 to 80% charge will take you 25 minutes, which is fairly decent in fairness. Anything under 30 minutes to me is good, okay? Then you move up to the 77 kilowatt hour extended range car, single motor. Now that was the car I was supposed to have, which is the equivalent of the Renault, okay? The Ford did have it booked for me, but unfortunately I think it got damaged before it came to me, so they switched me into a different car. I'll explain in a wee second, okay? But that 77 kilowatt hour car is the equivalent of the Renault, okay? So single motor, and that's the car that will do up to 354 miles between charges, okay? Very good, I think. It's a good range you get on the car. As I say, it's a single motor rear wheel drive car. That ups the charge, sorry, that doesn't, it changes the charging speed to 135 kilowatts, it actually goes down a little bit. But that means you're not to, sorry, a 10 to 80% charge is done in 28 minutes, so it's still below the 30-minute charge, okay? That's fine. But then you get this car, which is a 79 kilowatt hour dual motor car, okay? And that sort of like slots in below that single motor car for the range in terms of it does 328 miles of range. And now that will give you 185 kilowatts of charging power on the DC. So that's the fastest charging speed that you get on this one, in this particular one here. And that means a 10 to 80% charge in 26 minutes. So again, well below the 30 minutes, so it's good, okay? All of those are absolutely fine. All of the, you know, in terms of the battery sizes, the range that they give, the charging speeds, the charging times, I have no issue with any of that. It's all very, very good. However, Ford will make you pay extra for a heat pump, and there's no vehicle to load either. Right, then we get to the Renault, okay? So like the Ford, you do have a choice of batteries depending obviously on what you want, okay? So you start off with a 60 kilowatt hour battery, okay? That's the comfort range, as Renault call it. And that will give you a WLTP range of around about 260 miles, okay? So a bit more than you get in the base, the small battery Ford, okay? That's a maximum charging speed of 130 kilowatts. And that will see a 32-minute fill up from 15 to 80% as Renault quote. So maybe a little bit longer, maybe 33, 34 minutes to go from the 10 to 80%. So a little bit longer than you get in the Ford, in fairness, okay? But then there's this one, the 87 kilowatt hour battery, which, as I say, to me is the equivalent of the big battery you get in the Ford, and that gives a bigger range than you get in the Explorer at 369 miles, okay? But charging speeds increase to 150 kilowatts on that, but again, you're still talking of the similar time for a 15 to 80% charge, because obviously it's a bigger battery, so it's around about 30 to 32 minutes for the 15 to 80% charge. So again, you'll be stopped for a little bit longer in the Scenic than you will in the Explorer. Both cars get 22 kilowatts on the AC charging. Both batteries on the Scenic get the 22 kilowatt AC charged as well, but a heat pump is standard on the Renault, which I think is an important thing because it's quite a costly option on the Explorer, so do bear that in mind. Right, let's look at the Ford first. Now, as I say, this is a bit of a strange one, this, because this particular car I've got here is actually the dual motor car with 360 PS, which does 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, okay? So it's not really a fair fight in terms of performance with the Renault, okay? The car I was supposed to have, however, is the single motor extended range car, which is 286 PS and does 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds. So that's more of the line, that's the sort of car that you'd be looking at in terms of the equivalent to the Scenic that we have here. So there's no doubt about it, in terms of absolute outright performance, this is one category that the Explorer does succeed over the Renault. It does win over the Renault in terms of outright performance. But as I've always said, it's all very well being fast, but you know, and if that's fine, if it's, you know, when it's the Capri we're talking about, when we're talking about the soul of a sports car, do you need it in this sort of medium-sized family SUV? No, you don't. And if they had done it, and if they do it, I don't have a problem with it. But really go to town on it then, and call it, you know, do an RS model, you know, with body kits and big wheels and whatever. You know, like Skoda have done with the VRS, or, you know, other people have done. They just don't seem to have really bothered, you know. So I don't see the point in going for this, unless you really need all-wheel drive. I don't see the need in this dual motor car, and obviously it's much more expensive. Right, how does it drive? It drives okay, in fairness. It's quite nice to drive. The ride's a lot firmer though. The ride is quite firm in the car. I saw that on the Capri and I thought that the Explorer was going to be softer, and it's not. It's quite firm. Now this car does have 21-inch wheels on it, in fairness, which are an option, which probably have a lot to do with that. So there is an element of me that says that maybe just sticking with the standard wheels might help with the ride quality of the car, and it probably would, in fairness, but I can't see it being night and day difference. The other issue that amplifies that is the seat. As I was saying to you, it's quite hard, the seat, it's quite firm, you know, so you don't sink into it. You know, you've got quite a firm seat on the car, so that, you know, amplifies the sort of like the bounce that you get in the suspension. Now that's okay, you could say, well, it's, you know, meant to be supportive and you don't want a soft seat, you know, and all the rest of it. That's fine. The problem then comes is because you've got a firm suspension with not a lot of body roll, and you have a firm seat with not a lot of side support, physics take over when you go into a corner. And what you tend to happen is, because you're sitting on the seat rather than in it, and because you don't get that sort of, like, you know, the sponginess in the suspension, the dampers don't have that give, you as a driver and passengers, that's what gives. In other words, you roll out of the seat. So as you go into a bend a little bit too quickly, you find yourself rolling out of the seat. That's the problem with it. So it's fine on a nice arrow straight piece of motorway, or, you know, like, you know, a relatively open piece of A road or whatever, or roundabout town. As soon as the road starts to get a bit twisty, you find yourself rolling out of the seat of the car, because there just isn't enough support, and because the suspension stays flat through the corners, you're the thing that moves, not the car. So that's the first thing that I've got a bit of an issue with in some respects. So that's that. The other thing is it's not, I mean, it's quite quiet in terms of wind noise and stuff, that's okay, but there's a lot of chatter from in the car as well, from the suspension. You know, when you hit the bumps, when you do go over those sort of like slightly rutted pieces of road, or those broken surfaces, I always keep talking about it, round the M25 from me, you know, you go towards Dorking from sort of like, you know, my junction at Chertsey. When you go round there, there's a concrete section, and God, it just roars at you. You get that in this. Now, you get it in a lot of cars, don't get me wrong, but it really hears itself in this. And again, because you've got the big 21-inch wheels on it, the tyres, then it really amplifies the problem. So it's not as refined as the Renault. That's the other thing. You do get quite a nice drive away from the seat, away from the sort of like the seat that's a bit too firm and doesn't have enough support. You do get quite a nice piece of, you do get quite a nice driving position in the car. So, you know, you sit quite high up. So if you're coming from an SUV, or you prefer that style of drive, my wife, for instance, she prefers sitting quite high up in the car. This is a better car than Renault, because you see, you do have that more of a commanding driving position, and you can see the edge of the bonnet. And because I was saying earlier about the styling, you know, that's really sort of like straight edged, that kind of chunky styling. You've got a good visibility around the car. That is good, you know. So even over the shoulder where you're looking through those little quarter lights at the back, that's excellent. So that's fine. But the steering's a little bit vague as well. That's the other thing. And just off the dead ahead, and again, it was the same on the Capri. You can just as you go into a bend or a roundabout, you put the wheel in and you turn the wheel, and it's like the front wheels aren't quite responding immediately to your input, and they play catch up. So you put a big turn into the steering wheel, and then the wheels only turn slightly, then they seem to turn a bit more, and it just gives this slightly weird sort of, I don't know, it just, as I say, the car plays catch up, and that's when you find yourself kind of rolling out of the seat a little bit. It's a bit odd. Right. The brakes. Okay, so you go into drive as you would normally, and then of course you've got the D mode, and then you've got B mode, the braking mode. So if there's nothing behind me, I'm in the B mode. Let's see, does it come up to the full stop? No, it just comes up to a very small creep. It's got a very low creep. So it doesn't come up to full, but it's enough, I would say, if you like one pedal driving, you'd be fairly happy with that. It's not too aggressive, but you can't adjust any more brake regen than that. That's it. So it's either D mode or B mode. That's your lot. Okay, so that's maybe one downside if you like. I'm not fussed about it. I don't really bother with the whole one pedal driving stuff, but if you do, then just be aware of that. The brakes themselves, there is a little bit of a weird transition as it goes from regen to physical brakes. As you start to push the pedal, it's obviously using the regen of the motor, and then as you go through a much longer push of it, it then transitions into the physical brakes. Now, because it's on the MEB platform, you get drum brakes at the rear, and it's not a particularly smooth transition. That's the issue with it. So as you push, and then you got to push a bit farther till it actually brings you up to a stop. So it's got a very, it feels like you are stopping, but if I come up to this junction now, where you with the Renault would be really stopping me now, I've got to really push it, and then it stops. Then you get that weird sort of transition. So it's not as smooth in those heavier braking instances as, say, the Scenic, or some other cars in the class, let's say the Kia EV6 or Hyundai Ioniq 5. I don't want to be down too much on the Ford, because actually, in fairness, there's a lot of people will jump in this car and drive it and go, this is really nice. And in fairness, it is. There is a lot to recommend about it. As I say, I quite like the driving position. As much as I've complained about the switchgear and stuff, I like things like the big screen and things like that. That's nice to use. In terms of, it's relatively easy to use on the move and things like that. But I just keep coming back to price, even though you can get them cheaper than this, when I just come back to the price of it, I just think it's just not good enough. It's an average car at above average price point. That's the only way I can sum this up. It's absolutely not. If someone was to hand you this car and say, that's your car for the next 3 years, off you go. That's all you're going to drive for the next 3 years. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot you go, yeah, that's fine, that's okay, that's fine. But would you go out and spend your own money? Would you go out and spend over £50,000 on this car? I'm struggling to justify it. I really am struggling. It's good, but it should be so much better. Right, the Scenic. So there's no doubt about it, in terms of power, it's down on the Ford, of course it is. It's 220 horsepower, meaning a 0 to 60 time of 7.9 seconds. So, but there's an argument to say that anything under 8 seconds, 0 to 60 for a family car is, is quick enough. It's plenty, isn't it? Let's be honest. Anything more than that, and do you really need it? I know there'll be an argument of people that say, well, Tesla does this and Tesla does that. It doesn't really matter. I think, we're talking about family cars here. This is plenty fast enough. But it's not the performance, as I say. That's not the important thing with these two cars. And in many ways, in terms of their range and their efficiency in some ways either, that's not really the other solid point of it, because both are very good. Both have good ranges. Both are very efficient. Both drive well, in terms of that. But it's how the Renault behaves on the road in comparison with the Explorer I'm not going to say it's night and day difference, but there is a massive difference with the way these cars behave on the road. Sorry, my camera mount's rattling. Apologies. I'm just going to tighten that up. Sorry, apologies. Back to normal service. Yeah, how the cars behave is very, very different. And that is, the Renault has a much more sophisticated chassis. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention is the driving position. As I said to you before, in the Ford, you have a much higher, much more like an SUV style of driving position. There's no doubt about it, the Scenic feels more like a car, from that point of view. You don't sit quite as high up. You still got a good view out, you still got a good view of the bonnet, you still got a good view out the windows, the visibility is still very, very good. But there's no doubt about it, as I say, if you want an SUV style of driving position, the Explorer is the better of the two in that sense. Oh shush. Now, but the big difference, however, is first of all the seats. You really sit in the seats of the Renault, not on them. There's much more support down the sides. There's a much longer squab, and it's, dare I suggest, there's a much softer cushion itself. So that in itself absorbs a lot coming up from underneath the car. But it doesn't have to, because the chassis does that for it. The suspension setup on the Scenic is way superior to the Ford. There's just a lot more compliancy in the dampers. You can really feel them soak the bumps up a lot more. You can still feel them, you still know they're there, there's still the feeling that you are going over a bump, but the Renault's dealing with it better. The Ford just transmits it all through the structure of the car. It doesn't do that in the Renault. The spring and dampers are doing their job here. And then when you do get up onto a smoother part of the road, the refinement is off the chart. There's a really nice, it's a nice quiet car to drive. There's a much less road noise from the Scenic than you get in the Ford. Bear in mind, this is still on 20-inch wheels, so it's an inch down on the Fords, but even so, there's still an element of it. The road noise is way underneath what you'd expect, what you get from the Explorer. And there's less wind noise as well. So all of that together means it's a much quieter car in here, it's a much quieter car in the cabin. And also as well, it just feels a bit more, I don't know how to put it, a bit more sophisticated. That's maybe the wrong word to use. It just feels polished. It feels much more polished to drive. There's more of a weight in the steering. There's more of a response from the steering. As soon as you turn the wheel, you get that immediate response. And as I say, because you then have that slightly softer setup on the suspension, because the car leans and the car digs in, and the suspension absorbs that sort of like force as it moves round the corner, you don't roll out of the seat, you move with the whole thing. And that's the difference. That's why it's a much more comfortable car to drive. You still get a very good driving position. I still love the driving position. It's very similar to what my Megane had, You've got this really sort of like, not commanding, but you sit well back from the screens, you can see everything. The wheel itself is nice to hold. Your relationship with the pedals and the steering wheel is a lot nicer as well. So there is a really nice relationship as a driver with the car. But as I say, you do sit more in it. So that is one thing to be aware of. As I say, if you prefer that SUV style of driving position, the Ford is the better of the two in that sense. Now the brakes, you get brake regeneration adjustment obviously via paddle, but there's much more adjustment on the Renault than there is in the Ford. So you've got 4 levels of brake regen. So you can have it completely off, or you can go with levels 1, 2, 3 or 4. 4 being a real one pedal driving, and that's done via the paddles behind the steering wheel, where they should be in my opinion. So there's a nice level of adjustability with that. So if you do like one pedal driving, let's see, I'm on the same bit of road, nothing behind me. Hang on, I'll go into this straight bit here. Let's see if it pulls it right up to a halt. No, the Renault's the same, it's just a creep. So it pulls you up to a creep and then you stop the car. So there you go. So that's nice. So there's much more adjustability with the brakes. So if you're a big fan of the one pedal driving, you'll love this. The brakes themselves, they're not perfect in some respects. They're okay, there, but you know, there's a tiny little bit of, there's a spring at the top of the pedal almost. So it's not like the deadness you used to get with Stellantis cars. You can feel the pedal starting to sort of go for it, but then there's quite a sudden bite. So the brakes are really quite sharp. It takes you a little while to modulate that and get that absolutely right. So again, just on this piece of road here, if I just push the pedal, now all of a sudden, oh, that's my iPad gone. I've now stopped the car, you know, so it transitions quite sharply. You've got to watch that. So that is one thing I will say. The driving modes are much easier to access. They're not in the screen, they're the button on the steering wheel, and you just press it to get the one you want. So there's comfort, eco, where obviously everything sort of like deadens down. Sport, you want to go into sport, everything starts to glow red instead of green. You know, you've got a much sharper response on the throttle pedal. It feels lively, and that's what I mean. You've got to question if you genuinely do need any more than that, because I don't think you do. I think it's more than enough you get with a car. So there's no doubt about it. To me, the Renault is a much more polished car. It's a much more it's an easier car to live with. It's a more comfortable car, and as I say, there just feels like there's just a bit more thought gone into the chassis in terms of, and I'm not talking about pin sharp handling or anything like that. I'm just talking about the way the car behaves as a family car. It's a bit more refined up on motorway speeds. It's a bit quieter. The seats feel better. There's less chance of you sort of feeling uncomfortable in the seat, because although there's more body roll in the car, you stay in the seat, if that makes sense. So that's the big difference for me. And I think the steering's a sharper drive as well. You know, there's a much more positive action from the wheel. So there's no doubt about it. Whilst the Ford is faster, the Renault is better from a driver's point of view. This is a really good car. If you haven't driven a Scenic and you're looking for a family car, irrespective of whether you want an electric car or not, you got to drive a Renault Scenic, because I'll tell you what, this is a good bit of kit. This is a proper family car, I think. I really like this car. Now there's a bit to understand here when we start talking about pricing, because as I said, this was not the original Explorer that I booked. That particular car, which was the equivalent spec to the Renault, got damaged seemingly on its last loan, so Ford sent me this one. It's a bit of a last minute thing. So in fairness, at least we got a car. But this is the dual motor one, so it does put the price up. Same trim level, but with the dual motor and the different battery in it. Okay, so, but let's just talk about this one for a second, because we are looking at the Explorer as a car. This car here, as tested, okay, is over £58,000. Now I'm sorry, that's too much money. I'm sorry, Ford, it's just too much money. I don't understand where you get 60 odd, nearly £60,000 for this car. I really genuinely don't. And the thing is, it has got some options fitted to it, okay? But there are options, dare I suggest, that you need on the car to bring it up to the standard spec of the Renault, okay? So the options on this particular car, for instance, it's £4,150 for all the options on this car, okay? So that gives you the 21-inch wheels. Okay, you don't need them in fairness, but the heat pump, the metallic paint, and the driver assistance package, which gives you various different bits and pieces that you need to give you the standard spec of the Renault. I just don't understand that. I don't see where that's coming from at all, okay? But let's look now at the equivalent Explorer, the one we should have had, okay? So it would be the premium trim with the single motor. So that's an iconic. We go for the premium trim in the Explorer, okay? That starts at £49,975, okay? But as I say, bear in mind then you have to add on that driver assistance package and the heat pump. And if we're being accurate, metallic paint, because the Scenic that I'm going to quote you the price for has metallic paint, which would bring that car up at £53,125. Right, so the Scenic. This is an iconic long-range car, okay? And that starts at £45,495 before options. And the option that's fitted to this car is metallic paint. That's it, but just metallic paint, which is £750, brings this car up to £46,245 as tested. So 46 grand for the Renault, or 53 for the equivalent Explorer by the time you've spec'd it up to the standard spec of the Renault. And that's what I mean. You know, both cars, you know, you still get a relatively decent amount of spec on the Explorer, okay? So you still get panoramic sunroof, but the Scenic obviously goes one better with that solar base system on it. Ford gets leather. Okay, the Scenic doesn't have leather, but it's a leather cloth mixture, but it's still, I think the seats are more comfortable anyway, in fairness. Both cars get electric seats with massage, wireless chargers, although it doesn't work on my phone in the Explorer. You get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Obviously, it's the Google operating system that you get in the Scenic, which I think is slightly better. With the Ford, you get the B&O sound system, but with the Scenic, you get Harman Kardon. So they're all much of a muchness when it comes to their actual standard spec. But as I say, you've got to add on the driver assistance package and the heat pump into the Ford to bring it up to the spec of this car. Both cars come with a 3-year warranty, which I do think is slightly disappointing, especially with the Ford, because it's only 60,000 miles, whereas the Renault will top that out to at least 100,000 miles. But both are down on things like Kia and Hyundai, which obviously offer much more, as does the likes of MG as well. So do bear that in mind. Now, I said right at the start, you know, in terms of where Ford are now, you know, in terms of they need a decent sort of like, you know, family car, you know, to sort of play in the marketplace. And if we think about it, these style of cars are very popular. They are the sort of default family car now, whereas maybe it used to be Mondeo, you know, sort of like Laguna, you know, Vectra, Cavalier, Peugeot 406, whatever. It is these medium-sized crossovers, SUVs, that tend to be the default family car. And that's my point. This market sector is just bursting with them. And there's so many I'm now having to write them down. When we first started doing AutoEV, I barely ever read this thing. Of course, now I'm into my 50s, I now need to make sure that I do write everything down. So let's talk about it. So of course, if you're talking about the MEB platform the Explorer sits on, which it does, then obviously your first protocol is going to be Volkswagen Group, isn't it? So of course, you've got the ID4, the Skoda Enyaq, the Cupra Tavascan, you know, obviously the Volkswagen ID5, which is more of a thing for the Capri, in fairness, a rival for the Capri. Q4 e-tron. So those cars are going to be your first protocol with those ones there, okay? But in fairness, Renault also suffered a little bit from this as well, because this sits on the CMF EV platform, which Renault shares with its technical partner, and it too has a car in this market space, and it's a car that's often overlooked, and it shouldn't be, because it's bloody brilliant, and that's the Nissan Ariya. So that's a competitor for these two as well. And if you haven't driven an Ariya, give it a go, because I'll tell you what, that's a cracking car. If you just want a good, spacious, big family EV, then what's wrong with Vauxhall Grandland in some respects? You know, really good value for money with the Vauxhall, I think, and a lot of space in the car, okay? And of course, if you're looking at Vauxhall, then of course you're then into the Stellantis group, which means you're looking at Peugeot with things like the E3008 and of course the E5008, which at price point, you know, is over £50,000 like the Scenic, but offers 7 seats. So there we go there. Hyundai, you've got the Ioniq 5. Kia have got the brilliant EV6, although in fairness, what I will say about the EV6, it's a bit more of that sort of low slung style of crossover car, but they've got the EV5 coming out, which is going to be in this market sector. So that's one to think about as well. And if it's anywhere as good as things like the EV3, the EV6 and EV9, boy, these things are going to have a right fight in their hands. Toyota, now they're properly joining into the fray now, despite years and years of saying they're not interested in EVs. They've got the relatively mediocre BZ4X at the moment. Still a decent car in some respects to drive, but they're about to announce a new crossover. It might have already come out by the time this video does go out, but that's a car to consider. And of course, again, in terms of, you know, platform sharing, there's the Subaru Solterra equivalent as well. You've got to think about that car. And interestingly enough, it's a car that I'm going to be testing very soon. And it's one we've had on the channel before, and I wasn't impressed with it, but they've done something with it. And it's the Lexus RZ 300e. And that's the important bit, the 300e. In other words, they're doing a single motor version of the RZ, okay, to be more efficient. So again, if you were looking at the single motor Explorer, single motor Renault, you're into a Lexus, and that price of that car starts under £50,000. It's £49,995 in its lowest trim level. And I'm going to be driving that car very shortly as well. In fact, I'm going to be doing quite a test with that car, so you might want to be making sure you subscribe to the channel to watch that. So And I haven't even talked about other things such as the BYD C line that I'm going to be driving soon, the Leapmotor C10 that we tested the other week, the awful Skywell BE11. Trust me, I'd rather walk than drive that bloody thing. And of course Xpeng as well, which are coming into the market space. So my point is, there's a huge amount of cars out there, so there is a lot of choice for your money, and that's my problem with that Ford. It's just too much money. Let me start first of all by saying that I think the Ford Explorer is actually quite a good car. I quite like it in some respects. I prefer it to the Capri. If I was to make a list of pointless cars on sale today in the market, then the Capri would be pretty much at the top of my list. I just don't see where that car fits. It doesn't have any identity, and I think Ford have made a real mistake with that car, in fairness. The Explorer, not so much. I think actually there's a good car here in some respects. You know, it is exactly what people want. It's a medium-sized, practical, nice to drive family SUV that's all electric. The problem is, however, for me is twofold. One is, it's just a little bit too average. It's just too good in that sense. It's not exceptional, and in this marketplace, when there's so much to buy out there, when there's so much vying for your money, then you have to be better than merely good. You have to be brilliant, especially when it comes to the price that Ford are charging for this car, and that is my issue. Whilst you can get cheaper Explorers than this one here, the point of the fact is that by the time you've actually, even using the correct car, by the time you spec'd it to the Renault specification, it's still £8,000 more expensive. And I'm sorry, it's not £8,000 better than the Renault. In fact, even if they were the same price, it's not as good as the Renault, because the Renault, in my opinion, is a better looking car. It's better to drive, it performs better, it has a better range and efficiency. It's cheaper to buy, it's better equipped, and it goes to show why this car is our best medium-sized family EV and why it walked away with the award in the 2024 AutoEV Awards. Not only is it the best car here, but I genuinely do think it's probably the best car in the marketplace. Whereas the Ford, it has its work cut out to gain more followers, I would suggest. I think 30 years ago things were very, very different than they were now. And if anyone's going to feel that now, it's Ford. But dare I suggest they've only got themselves to blame by giving us fairly average products. Thank you for watching another twin test on AutoEV. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, make sure you give a little thumbs up at the bottom, and also make sure that you're subscribed as well. And if you press the little bell button after you've done that, that means you'll be notified when the next video is uploaded and it's gone live. Don't forget, leave me your thoughts down in the comment section as well. What do you think about the verdict I've just given? Would you have the Explorer over the Scenic? Or would you agree with me the Scenic is by far the better car? Would you have neither? Have you bought one or the other? Did you buy the Explorer rather than this? Did you buy this over that? Did you buy something else completely? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now remember, we're also across all social media platforms as well, so if you're into your Facebook or your Instagram or your TikTok or your LinkedIn or whatever it is, you'll probably find us there. So give us a follow there too, because that certainly helps. And if you're in the marketplace for an electric car, might not be a new one, might not be one of these two, maybe you're thinking about maybe a used Mustang Mach-E or a second-hand Renault Megane E-Tech, but you need to know a bit more about it. You need to know all the facts and figures before you go and sign in the dotted line. How do you find out? Well, here's how. Stay on the AutoEV YouTube homepage. Just at the top there, you'll see a little magnifying glass. Type the name of the car you're interested in there, and if it's been a new electric car in the UK in the last 4, 5, 6 years that we've been going, then of course we'll have subjected it to the road test, the actual car buyers trust when it comes to choosing their next electric car. And of course, folks, that is the AutoEV one. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. Thank you for continuing to support the channel. See you again soon.